I'm Aaliyah Stern, and I worked on writing the songs as well as editing the scene audio and collaborating a bit on writing the scenes.
Hi, my name is Josh, and I was one of the two main writers, along with Eden Sweet, who is at summer camp and can't be with us today. But I know that she enjoyed being a part of this as much as we all did.
Hi, I'm Max Rubin. I was the one in charge of the music audio, so mixing and mastering of the audio. I also, at points in time, was working with Aaliyah, just listening over, like being a second set of ears.
My name is Sarah Shapiro. I'm the vocal music teacher at Milken, and one of the classes I teach is Advanced Kol Echad that Aaliyah, Max, and Eden were all students in. And I was the music advisor / editor for the musical.
And I am Sarah Figeton. I'm the acting teacher and theater director at the upper school. And similarly to Ms. Shapiro, I teach advanced theater projects, and Josh is my faithful student. And so I was here helping develop the story for the musical.
I'm glad everyone was a part of it, because that I think that's completely what made it what it was. Because this story kind of has like a bit of every single one of our inputs to it, at least at some point. And that's something really meaningful and special.
Also, that kind of the main way that we were able to progress, but just between the weeks, was that there was individual work, obviously, but then after we would have like a first draft of either lyrics or dialogue, we would kind of check in with each other and have someone maybe from a different component proofread that and see what they thought just about like the story in general, just because we're all working on the story together, but also to make sure that if there was something we wanted to put in the songs, that it didn't come from nowhere out of the scene, or that maybe something in the scene, the emotions expressed didn't necessarily align with what we had, and did now we have to change something. And so each being each other's proofreaders, to be able to both have that consistency, but also just to be able to collaborate on the whole thing and just help each other out, and to help each other be able to progress once we started our own individual stuff.
I'll say that I think organization and consistency were like the two key components. So starting from the very beginning, coming out with just like even a simple breakdown of what the story was going to be, making a list of all of the different like plot points. And then we have, I mean, the students were amazing with creating various spreadsheets to make sure what was going to be written in song form, what did we need scenes for. And then every week we met during Lishma on Thursdays. And that was kind of the time when we would review material and see where we were, what had been worked on in the last week. And then we would go into breakout rooms, and there would be like the writers meeting in one room and the music writing or editing in another room. But I'll say that, I mean, on my end, I was just so impressed that like every week we would come back and work had been done. And so the students were meeting independently together, working on their own and continuing to develop the story. And we just continued to like peel it away a piece at a layer at a time, and, you know, read through sections of it, refine that, bigger chunks, then refine that, and just over. And I mean, when you're developing new work, it's just rewriting forever is basically the way that it goes.
I really enjoy kind of creating and telling stories, characterization, creating these people. And so I guess on the broad side of things, that it was really fun to work on just the original creation aspect of this, and sitting down, writing out, picking names together, and kind of creating the individual details of these characters.
I have a question for you guys. So I'm assuming that this is the first time that you've developed new work. I think it was my last semester in college. That was the first time that I had directed a new piece. And it is such a different process than a normal, you know, being an actor in a show. And so I'm just kind of curious to hear about like, what was your experience to be the one actually like making the story for the first time, and the frustrations and the pride in it? I mean, it's really cool. It's cool to create something from nothing.
I can start with this. My concern was like creating it with other people. So when Eden and I started to write the first scene together, like I was nervous, like, are we going to be able to come up with something? Our thought process is going to be very different. And we actually thought about writing in very similar ways, which allowed us to like write the first drafts of scenes separately and then edit them together, because we had similar thought processes on how the story should unfold and all that. And then the trickier part was just making sure like continuity lined up with the songs that Aaliyah and Max were working on.
I suppose from like the acting perspective, for me, when we're doing theater productions, when finding out my character and kind of reading through my lines, I always tend to try and look at the lines and see how would this character just respond to things normally? How as a person would they react to different situations, and what would come naturally? And so in characterization and trying to write these kind of reactions to these situations, kind of doing the same thing.
Aaliyah, I'm curious, and Max too, since you guys were the kind of the main foragers of the music side of it, like taking those intentions and then turning them into music, like what was that process like?
The way I tried to write them was almost like what I would do in creative writing. Since we can't describe the setting, it's not narration, it's kind of conveying those feelings into words and wanting to put that characterization into words. And so looking at the scenes, looking what we have outlined to happen in those scenes, and then trying to transfer what that character feels at that time, or what that character is going through, how their thought processes are changing, and kind of how that moment changes. And then putting that into words, I found was the best way to work on keeping those emotions consistent and working on keeping that content consistent. And then experimenting with different notes and different rhythms and tempos and background music and seeing kind of what fit. I think sometimes there might have been some melodies that I might have liked a bit better and wanted to put in, but for the sake of keeping the phrasing as it was, that I might have done something different. And I was more concerned with keeping the integrity of the words and then being able to shape the melody around that, than to have to maybe get a slightly different meaning from what I wanted fit into a different melody.
My process is actually quite contrary to Aaliyah's. When I do write music, I tend to write the music thinking, how is the music itself going to convey the message? And then trying to fit the words are like supplementary to the music. So the music is the thing that invokes the feeling within the audience. And then the words are to explain what's actually happening, because I mean, to me, that tends to be the musicals that hit me most. For instance, I remember when we were writing Diagnosis, Aaliyah and I went back and forth on whether or not it should be in 5/4 or 3/4. So like we ended up going with 3/4 for like the sake of keeping it like reasonable with how long it would take to write this one song. Because often going the other way becomes very complicated, like Aaliyah says. It takes a long time to write your words to a melody that is already there and say what you actually want to say. I feel like we actually ended up doing like what Aaliyah does a lot more, and I think it was definitely the more efficient route. So that's really why we did a lot of it that way. And it's like,
I will say also, when shaping the lyrics, something that I believe we ended up doing was kind of a combination of what we both just said, that while we wanted to work on characterization and the lyrics and conveying what happens in the scenes in song, that we were also thinking about what the song would actually sound like when we were writing the lyrics. And so if kind of what we did for Diagnosis, those choppy short phrases, that we knew that's what the feeling we wanted that like rushed kind of disoriented feeling, and kind of vaguely imagining the instrumentals behind it. Or with Jesse's song, Decisions, I still call it that, knowing the kind of harsh feeling we want behind it and kind of strong feeling, or just whether we want a light piano behind certain sections, and that would shape the lyrics and things, but that stuff would end up coming afterwards. It would just kind of influence.
I will say one of my favorite parts about working on this show was that you guys would come and you would have melodies and most of the words, and you'd be like, oh yeah, we're still figuring this part out. And you'd have, when it came to the instrumental section, I feel like that was where I got to actually help you a lot, was like figuring out the harmonizations, figuring out the texture of the instrumentalization. And it was really fun for me when I'm like, well, we could do it this way. And this is kind of like imitating Jason Robert Brown style, and this way is like imitating Stephen Sondheim style, and this is like more rock and roll style. And sometimes you'd be like, oh no, not that one. And somebody would be like, yes, something like that. And like seeing it all like kind of click together with like the music helping to tell the story. And also I loved when I would come and say like, okay, I see what you're doing here, but then you do something totally different here, and we have to bridge that, or we need to bring back that motif, or we need a musical, you know, the music, the feeling of the music needs to match that.
Yeah, I think that these characters really allowed us to kind of give the perspective of looking at relationships between people and kind of seeing how that works. What parts of that have we experienced ourselves, and how those different relationships relate to where we are in our own lives with our own friends and those around us. And if we were in those character situations, how would we want to react? And to some degree, there were some moments where we're writing it where it's like, ah, yes, I know this feeling well. How do I want to portray this in this character? Through these characters, writing help for those characters while still keeping in the integrity of that characterization. Because Kate, as much as we would want to be the kind of like perfect form of help, we still have to keep in mind that that isn't the case necessarily, and that there's that balance between what we want to give to the characters and what the characters themselves are able to give.
And then, and then them starting to bounce off each other too. It's
yeah.
Then they kind of start to live, and you see their dynamic. And so I think that's it kind of like lifts off the page at a certain point, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say that it was a really interesting process because you guys landed on not only a subject matter that luckily none of us had lived through, but also that your characters were all older than you are. And so there was this, I mean, it's been a really interesting process, like hearing the ways in which you were bringing your own perspective to it. And then also moments where like Shap or I had to go like, oh, okay, so like when you have a roommate, that's not how it works. And bring a little more lived experience, that perspective to the mix as well. But I think that you, considering there was this kind of age gap between you and the characters, that the people that you created feel very 3D to me. So it's impressive. Tasking students with developing a musical, I mean, it's a big undertaking. And just going like, what happens if you say yes to this? And then seeing everything that's come out of it is so fulfilling. And I'm hopeful that this isn't the last time that any of you will write something.
Seeing how these feelings gradually change throughout these characters and being able to put those experiences into words and to explain those emotions and to flesh those out, I think was a big thing for me. Whenever I'm writing characters, I like to see them grow, and I like to see how they are and how they're feeling, and then see how that changes. And as they're thinking through things, see how that changes. And I think adding that personal lens in throughout that process, whether in writing, waiting, and the different kind of thought process that changed throughout that, or writing Learning to Love Again, and seeing how we can grow throughout that being able to write those shifts and being able to kind of help put these things into words and flesh out these characters throughout the different means was something I really enjoyed throughout the process.
What is the thing that we're hearing? At what time do we hear it? Is it full, or is it very almost under a towel? Like, what do we want in this moment? Do we want everything to feel very echoey, like we're singing in an empty room and no one can hear us scream because we're all alone in here? Or do we want something that's really close and intimate, that is very like, that person is right in front of you right now? And it's like to have that, like to be able to make those choices at the end of it all is like kind of, it's kind of scary and very easy to do very wrong. To be able to sort of make it that and sort of stitch all the different parts together into the fabric that was like the final outcome of our music was really, really gratifying. And I feel like it all came together beautifully with beautiful lyrics and beautiful music and like the beautiful instrumentals and vocals all coming together to be this like really amazing thing. I mean, that was so, I mean, like, I remember waking up 2 days later, remembering that moment and smiling just because it was like really gratifying.